Okay, the meeting is live.
Thank you very much. We'll give a minute or two. I don't think Scott is with us yet. Okay, I'm going to call to order the Finance and Budgeting Committee meeting for Monday, November 30th, 2020, and ask the clerk to please call the roll.
On the roll, Mr. Miller,
Here.
Mr. Tuma. Mr. Tuma is absent at the moment. Ms. Simon,
Here.
Mr. Gallagher,
Here.
Mr. Schrein. Mr. Schrein is absent today. Ms. Brown,
Here.
Ms. Baker.
Here.
We have a quorum. Also like the record to reflect that Councilwoman Conwell is also in attendance.
Great. Thank you very much. And item number 3 on the agenda is public comment. Do we have any public comment for this meeting?
No, Mr. Chair, no public comment was submitted for this meeting.
Thank you very much. And item number 4 is approval of the minutes for the October 19th, 2020 meeting. Do we have a motion relative to those minutes?
I'll move for the motion.
Second, Simon, to approve.
Okay, we have a motion from Councilwoman Baker and a second from Councilwoman Simon and others to approve the minutes as presented. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say no. The ayes have it, and the minutes from October 19th, 2020 are approved. There are no legislative items referred to the committee for today, so we're going to move on to our presentations, of which we have 3. And the first presentation is regarding an update on CARES Act funding. The CARES Act funding is large at $215 million, with a spending deadline of December 31st, and our plans are quickly changing as at least $15 million previously programmed will not be spent and is being reprogrammed. Therefore, I've asked for frequent updates to Council regarding these funds. Director Tkachuk provided 2 reports during the budget update hearing and provides a 3rd update here today. Director Tkachuk.
Hi, thank you. Excuse me. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to share my screen okay. And provide you with an update and answer any questions you have. So there were a couple questions that came in ahead of time that I wanted to address. One was regarding the building updates for the social distancing. As you all know, the initial budget estimate for that was $30 million. Our current projected spend on that is $15.6 million. So the last time we talked, it was 15.1. However, since then we've added the diversion center costs $500,000. That is currently pending council approval. And will be discussed at the December 3rd Committee of the Whole. So if that's approved, then we would move those costs and look to spend those dollars before December 30th. That's the estimate of what they think they can spend right now. So that was kind of an update on where we were in that. Wanted to do some additional CARES budget updates. So one of the things that also came as we've had this money, it was put into an interest-bearing account, which was allowed by the CARES Act, but in order to do that, you still have to spend the dollars in CARES appropriate items. So we have received what we believe the interest will be, which is about $457 in interest that was earned on that. So that brings our total CARES funding available up to 215.9, almost $216 million that's available in CARES funds. So I'm accounting for that now in our budget when we look to spend additional funds. Some new items that were approved since the last time we talked was $345,000 for the food bank. This will help them buy emergency food for the month of December, while also providing a backpack program for food for children, as well as we know a lot of children being home or, especially over the holidays, not in school, that they would receive meals. So they have a program. We had previously provided them with $200,000. So this is an amendment bringing their total up to $545,000. Another program is a restaurant program. So $1.25 million. That is specifically very similar to our small business program, but focusing specifically on restaurants. So restaurants that have had, obviously we know with everything going on, loss in customers, loss in income related to that. So putting out a program where they'll be able to submit to apply for grants up to $10,000 to cover their costs, rent, utilities, what they've needed to do as throughout 2020, they can apply for that if they haven't received as long as they have costs above and beyond what they've received from previous programs. So we wanted to do one, since we know restaurants are very hard hit right now, we wanted to do a specific program for restaurants. So that's $1.25 million. We have another item. One of the questions were items that were not going to be fully spent. So this is not an item that is not going to be fully spent, but this is an item that the FEMA Public Assistance Grant allows us to pay for certain things that we initially paid for out of the CARES grant. So for example, PPE, we can look at paying that through a FEMA Public Assistance Grant. So we have submitted to try and get that funding spent through FEMA Public Assistance to allow for our CARES funding to be used at things that are not allowed through FEMA Public Assistance. So we haven't received official approval yet, but we are pretty confident that almost $4 million we will be able to transfer over to FEMA Public Assistance. Specifically, those are our PPE purchases throughout the year, as well as the homeless hotel, what we paid for when we had COVID positive patients. So those that were homeless that tested positive, and we had some hotel costs to help provide a safe location for them. We think we'll be able to transfer both of those over there. So we wanted to take that into account since we knew by the time we find out exactly, we may also be up against the deadline. So we're looking at projecting for that. So this is the chart that I've shown previously, but updated as of today. So you can see the budget, and at this point where we are on the budget is, quite a bit higher. Was that over that 230 in terms of what was approved. So as we've said, we've been doing spending checks for projects throughout the year. And that actually takes us to about $107 million in approved council programs. Again, that $2.5 million, that's the same as the previous one in terms of direct charges, things that departments may have purchased directly that didn't require any additional approval, but that were COVID-19 related. The same $103 million for those employee related costs. And then we have about $5 million in programs that are pending approval, and I'll have that list on the next page. That actually takes us to about 217, almost 218 million. I subtracted the FEMA spending out of that, so we're projecting right now at about 200, almost 214 million. So we do have programs that are still pending approval. So the gap funding for the cities, as those are due, those different applications are due today from the different cities. And so we have 3 million set aside in that, just waiting to see what we've received back. Again, we've done some approvals of nonprofits, but we still have about 531,000 that we're expecting to take forward for approval for various nonprofits. We still have about 400,000 that we're anticipating in purchasing of PPE throughout the end of the year. And then about another 400,000 in IT expenses that are working their way through for Board of Control and various approvals. There's a couple of other things, smaller purchases that are in there as well, but they're pretty small. And then one other item that I don't have on this list that's included in that 4.5 million is the 500,000 for the diversion center that's not included in here as well. One of the things that we are, it puts us at about a little under around 2 million that we don't have if we get the full FEMA response. But what we also know is we have programs with applications that we're waiting to be returned in, say, like a lot this week. For example, the city requests, the small business program, the restaurant program. We've put dollars in there right now based on our best guess on what the need will be. However, we're not sure. And so we think that's an opportunity for, if we get large needs above and beyond what we currently have set aside for those are programs that we could adjust in order to make sure we can meet the need in our community through some of those programs with some of the dollars that we don't have available. And then we're sort of keeping an eye. We haven't heard anything yet about if they will. We haven't officially heard, we're keeping an eye on if they will extend the deadline at all with some of the resolutions to sort of keep the government open. We're not counting on that because we want to make sure we still are aiming to spend the dollars, but we'll just keep an eye on that because we know we'll have needs that go in. Our needs on the COVID pandemic do not stop as of December 30th, even though these grant dollars come out. So if there is an extension, we would certainly want to look at having dollars to help cover our needs in 2021. But we still have plans in place to make sure that we can try and spend all of the dollars and support our community as best we can. So those were the slides to answer the questions I'd received and give an update. I'm happy to answer any questions.
So thank you very much, Director, for some significant new information. And I would now ask if any of my colleagues have questions for the Director.
I do, Mr. Chair, Sunny.
Yes.
So thank you. What's the difference between gap funding for cities and programs with applications to be returned for cities? Are those different
They're
programs?
the same thing. No, same program. Yeah.
Okay, so it's not additional money. You're just waiting for cities to respond to the 3 million gap funding opportunity?
Right. And if for example, we got 3.5 million, we may want to look at some of those additional dollars to cover what we need. So we're just waiting to see what we have left or what they need.
How is it going, Mr. Chair, through Catherine, with the applications? Are they coming in, and to whom are they being sent?
Yes, they're being sent to Michelle Pomerantz, and I believe we received, I want to say 10 or 15, and I think, we're, with this being the deadline, we're expecting a lot more to come in today.
Thank you.
So,
Chair, I have a question. Ann Baker.
Ms. Baker.
Thank you. The small business program that we initially recently put out, how much was in that small business program?
It was 4 million for small businesses, and then there was, I think it was 4.3 million total. There was some administrative expenses as well.
And then how much is the restaurant program?
1.25 million.
Okay, so this is the first I've heard of the restaurant program. So I would probably leap to the conclusion that the restaurant program and small business program are somewhat the same. Can the small business program also be applied by restaurants? That, if I may, the 4 million that was put into the small business program was a considerable amount of money. From recalling, that was over twice as much as phase 1 and phase 2. So why did we expand that out even more so for restaurants, if restaurants can be included in small business program?
I think the reasoning behind it was small businesses, cover a wide variety. We know our restaurants have been very hard hit, and we wanted to set aside some specific dollars that were to address their need, because we were concerned that with the response we're expecting from the other small business program, they could get swallowed up a little bit, I think, in that other one with the wide range. So we wanted to set aside, knowing how hard hit restaurants have been throughout this whole pandemic. So setting aside some specific dollars.
Thank you. And if I may, so the small business program at 4 million, are they also allowed to apply to that? And is there a difference between the two as far as conditions or what qualifies them?
Yes, they are allowed to apply, I think, for both of them. I think when we're going through it, well, there's a little bit of stagger, so we'll be able to identify if they've to take that into account when we go to award dollars. So, for example, we can look at covering the restaurants in the restaurant program and then leave the rest of it for small businesses if we can do that. But I think there's not differences in between them. It's just one is specifically directed at our restaurants because of how hard hit they were.
Okay, that's a considerable amount of money in both those pockets. Just curious how that will play out. The second question, if I may.
Yes, please.
What is the total before interest that we received for the CARES money? Was it 215 million even?
No, it was 215 million. Let me hold on one second. Give me the right number. 215,510,539.80.
Okay, so that 215.5 plus the interest is how you get to the 215,968.
Yes.
Okay. That's all for now. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. So to amplify on Ms. Simon's question, the director said that regarding the municipalities, if we receive more than $3 million in requests from the municipalities, we may be able to use some of the approximate $2 million gap that currently exists between the projected spending, which is just under 214 million, and the total available, which is just under 216 million. So we have the possibility of going somewhat beyond the $3 million on the municipal assistance if there are requests for that additional assistance. One other question I have, Director, is that I was contacted by a restaurant in my district that said that they were not able to access the prior programs because they had more than $1 million in revenue and were excluded on that basis. My question is whether the new restaurant program will have that same limitation, or will this one be different?
I will have to confirm that with development, but I will get that information for you.
Thank you very much.
Mhm.
Any other questions by my colleagues? Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
Councilman Tuma.
Okay. And just to note that Councilman Tuma is now in the meeting and you have the floor.
Appreciate that. Thank you. As far as these cities go, the deadline is today. Is that a hard deadline, or is there any flexibility if some municipality comes and says, hey, this just came up next week sometime, or later this week?
So, I mean, I think I would have to confirm this, but I believe we want to try and get all the requests so that we can make a plan for the $2 million. But if something came up, we would look and work with council to see if we need to address that.
Okay. No, I appreciate that. Thank you. That's it, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else, my colleagues? Okay. Thank you very much, Director. That was a very helpful report. We appreciate your assistance.
Yep. Thank you.
Next, we have the update on the Harris project, the county's new property tax system, which is expected to go live at the end of next year. Director Jack Ryan is presenting.
Thank you, Chairman. Let me just get my screen up and shared here. Just a moment. I also have on the phone with me Debbie Daftovich and Mike Chambers, and we'll be jointly going through the brief on the Harris project. Hold on just a moment. Let me get the appropriate brief up here. Here we go. Okay. thank you for the opportunity today to share the information with you. We'll walk through the status of the program briefly, where we are in finances, and the two major parts of the program for the Harris Tax Project and the Camp Project, all part of the same overall program. From a overall program status point of view, we you may recall this from a previous briefing. We had we are basically sitting at functional testing here. We completed everything, as you can see from this chart. We're about 49% through functional testing. We'll spend some time talking about that and talking about the schedule, but that's the current status of our testing, and we are moving through that. Some of the challenges that we have within the program, there's always challenges, and here's kind of where we are at this point in time. We've got functional testing is taking longer than anticipated. That does not mean that we've moved our end date. I should say that right up front before, as we talk about challenges, but we are working through functional testing is a critical phase, because it's before we can actually have user acceptance testing, we have to test every piece of functionality to make sure that it's working correctly, and there's lots of those pieces involved here, and I'll let Debbie talk about those in just a moment. So we have defect correction is taking longer than we'd anticipated. We're finding things. That's a good thing. That's why we test. We've also taken a look at our strategy to see how we can save time. And I'll let Debbie talk about exactly what the change in strategy is here in just a minute. But what the net of that is that the next step in the process, user acceptance testing, will start a little later than expected, but we're going to be able to run some parts of that simultaneous with functional testing in order to pick up some time in the schedule so we can stay on track. We will do the same thing with system integration testing, which is what follows user acceptance testing. We'll run some of that simultaneous with user acceptance testing, again, compressing our schedule a bit. We've got a long-term strategy in place for management of the program by having somebody that's responsible for real estate, the real estate solution overall. And we have some vacancies, but they've been posted. The critical staff vacancy, to jump ahead a little bit, is that we had an offer extended for a senior IT project manager. Our current project manager at some point is going to be retiring here, and then we've also just got a lot of work to do and need more emphasis in that area. And the good news is, as of this morning, we have an acceptance of that offer by that person, so they'll be joining here no later than the first week in January. So we're excited about that. I think that'll bring some additional much needed assistance on board. So Debbie, I'll let you talk a little bit about functional testing, and I'll hand that over to you for a minute.
Okay. Do we want to move to that slide, or I just can kind of talk to it in general?
Sure, I'll let you talk through accomplishments, and then we'll get there. Sorry.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, so as Jack said, we developed a release plan for future upgrades. One of the issues that we were having was that we were finding errors, and Harris was turning around the fixes for those errors so quickly that we were kind of in a circular pattern of having to repeat certain steps. So we've agreed to hold off on future releases so that we can bundle them and package them, and then test all of those items at once. So that includes additional regression testing, which is why it's taking a little bit longer. We did add additional staff to our functional testing. So we previously we only had 4 analysts that were doing testing. We added 3 resources from Treasury, and they've assisted us with some of the billing and collection type testing. So that's been very helpful. Since the past reporting period, we updated 819 test cases, and we currently only have 86 tests that have not been reviewed. Harris has resolved 67 support issues. I think the main takeaway here is that we are getting through the testing. As Jack mentioned, some UAT may begin earlier in specific areas. When we look at the percentage complete in certain functional areas, you know, where we're at 100% complete in one area for functional testing, we'll get some of those end users in there to test that, that functionality so that we can begin UAT in some areas quicker so that we're not falling behind in other areas.
Okay. Right. That's a lot of testing to be done, and you can just see by the number of tests, it sort of denotes the complexity of what the team's dealing with here, but they are making good progress at this point. Just a word about program finances at the moment. I think the best word that I can give you is on the next two slides, is that there have been no changes, literally no changes in the financial position of the program, because we have not made any payments. We may recall that we came before council and made a change to the amendment to the contract, that one of those changes being, the critical one being, that all payments would be made based on very specific milestones that were finer grained than what we identified before. And the next one of those milestones has to do with various pieces of functional testing. That functional testing, since it's underway as we're reporting today, that milestone hasn't been achieved, or those milestones haven't been achieved. Therefore, we're holding payments on those, as we should. So there's really no change in the financial condition of the program. Also, the contingency balance that we had for any additional change orders. This is the list of things that had been approved so far. No change orders have been submitted, therefore no change in the contingency balance on the program either. Any questions on any of that before we move on?
Jack, I have a question, if I may, Chair.
Ms. Baker.
So we haven't paid anything because we have not hit the new milestones. But if
Yes,
we
ma'am.
had hit the new milestones, then we would be paying. So we're not saving anything, we're just deferring. Yet what we need to pay.
That's correct. This is a matter of accountability for milestones, not changing the payments amounts. There is a detailed list, I believe we have it in backup slide, that from the previous brief, that shows the amount of each milestone as we reach them. So, and there are several milestones that are part of functional testing, and so we have to achieve those milestones one at a time before we'll make those payments. But it is not a savings.
Right. And if I may, I know you touched on this, but how far behind are we in those milestones? Would you have thought we would have been there by now and started engaging in those payments?
We would have thought that, and I'm gonna, if I could ask you to hold that for just a minute, we've got some
Sure.
detail on it coming up.
All right. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. So let me just start with this, and Debbie, I'll let you talk to this slide if you could, and let's just kind of walk through the schedule and where we are, because I think that speaks directly to Councilman Baker's question.
Sure. So, you know, obviously we've completed all of the phases that are in green. We're currently in functional testing. We have in total, 49% of our test cases have passed. So we're about halfway there. We need to get through, in order for us to complete all the functional testing, we believe that we can get that done by the end of next month. And then we are giving an additional month of buffer time to resolve any issues and us to retest any issues, just to make sure that everything is you know, thoroughly tested and complete prior to opening up to user acceptance testing. Again, some of these areas, if they're 100% functional, they pass 100% of the functional testing, we can engage end users earlier. So it's not like we're going to, you know, absolutely wait until the end of January to do that. In some areas, it could begin earlier. And then, of course, there can be crossover with system integration testing too. So we're not going to wait until the end of April or the 1st of May to start that. Where we can do system integration testing, where it's ready and we've passed the user acceptance testing, we can begin that early as as well. So we're still on schedule for our go live in October 2021. We didn't shave any time off user training because that's very important. We want to make sure that we thoroughly train end users and that they know and understand how to use the product.
Okay. All right. And here's the milestones with a little bit more detail on the payments. So this is, you know, as Debbie was saying, this is where we are, 49% passed. But these are the payment amounts that will come into play as we achieve those. So, any questions on this, Debbie? I don't know if you want to talk about any specific items here in terms of what's passed and blocked, but
yeah, I mean, we have in the backup, some of the backup slides we have, for example, transfer and conveyance, some of that for the recorder's office, some of that functionality is doing very, very well. In some of those categories, we have 100% pass rate, so we will engage end users to begin user testing relatively soon, probably within the next week or so. So there will be crossover in the periods, but you know, with these payments, until we are 100%, actually, sorry, according to the contract, we have to have a 95% pass rate and no significant issues that would prevent us from going live. That's a criteria for us to release the payment in each of these categories, 5A through 5F. So, you know, this is the big picture of 49%, but if we drill down to each one of those different functional areas, we have a different pass rate. And here we go. So parcel maintenance, that one is at 71%. And some of the other areas are over 49% as well.
okay.
If I may ask a question, Chair?
Yes, you may. Please proceed.
2 slides earlier, I believe. You're able to take it back. Yeah, that one. So every time we get behind, it seems, and then we start compressing the work that needs to be done, and we still keep the same scheduled date for going live, the pattern has been that it never, it becomes an optimistic start date because of the work that is left to do that we're doing in a shorter period of time. Are you at all concerned that we're going in that direction again, given that we're 49% complete as it stands today?
I'm sorry, I don't know who you directed that question to.
Either one of them, I guess.
Jack, either one.
Okay. Well, I think that, and I'll let Debbie also comment here as well if she wants. But I mean, I've listened to a lot of the challenges that we've got with the team. I think we've addressed, as we talked about in the earlier slide, we certainly addressed a number of things to mitigate those, including changing our testing approach. The fact that we've added testers, and also, of course, that means more work in a shorter period of time, but we also added 3 testers to functional testing from the Treasury group. So and those same testers are going to be working in as we go through user acceptance testing as well. So while we're compressing some areas, and there's always a concern that you could push a go live date, we don't feel like we've consumed, if that's the right word, you know, the contingency in the schedule or the slack that we had in the schedule to the point where it would force a change in the go live date. So we're definitely not at that point at this point. We think we've mitigated most of that by adding people and then managing the schedule with some overlaps that we mentioned.
If I may, in that first yellow arrow, should that read 6/22/20 to 1/29/2021?
Yes, it should.
Oh, yes, it should. Yes, ma'am. Sorry.
All right, and I've learned to maybe pay attention to the language. The UAT may begin earlier in some cases. I mean, how confident are you that you will be beginning in those next 2 deadlines that you have not started yet?
I'll let Debbie take that one on. I think we've talked about that.
Yeah, so that kind of goes to what I mentioned earlier. So transfer and conveyance, we have subcategories that are ready for, that are 100% complete now, 100% passed. That we'll turn those over to user acceptance testing probably within the next week or so, just because they're complete, they're done. We don't have to look at them again. So end users will be engaged there, and every opportunity that we have to do that throughout the schedule, we're going to do that. But overall, 100% complete with the functional testing. We believe that the end of January at this point is a realistic date.
Okay, thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Good.
Sure.
Okay. Any other questions before we move out of this section? Okay. So this is the schedule for the CAMA portion of the project, and Debbie, I'll just let you take that one on as well, if you would.
Sure. So last time we presented to council, we did not have dates on these items. We do have these estimated dates here. So all of our discovery sessions have been completed. What we're going to move into next is some more interactive sessions where we're going to see some functionality, the base functionality of the system, and then wireframes for modifications to that functionality to meet our needs. We do have a demonstration of a mobile component tomorrow afternoon. Our program is basically on schedule at this point in time. We don't see any red flags here.
So
All right.
can you tell us
Sorry.
what CAMA stands for and describe to us a little bit about what it is?
Sure. So CAMA is Computer Assisted Mass Appraisal. So the CAMA portion of the project involves the valuation of properties throughout the county, on both commercial and residential. So there's various approaches to valuation. There's an income approach, there's a cost approach, and then there's comparable sales. So really the CAMA side of the project involves analyzing the square footage, the neighborhood factors, the different valuation approaches to come up with a unified model for assessing property value. And that system is currently, we have separate systems for tax and CAMA. Currently, in the new system, it'll be one system, so it'll be a much more streamlined approach as far as we won't have to be passing files back and forth or using siloed programs to perform different functions. Everything will be self-contained within one system.
Okay. Debbie, you might want to just talk about the significance of that mobility demonstration. We haven't seen it yet, but we're going to see tomorrow.
Right. So basically the mobility allows the appraisers to go out in the field using tablets. Currently, all of that work is done today on paper and pencil. We print massive quantities of books that we send out to the field appraisers. They mark up these books. They bring them back to the office. We hire data entry operators to type that information into a system. So it's really kind of an antiquated process. The new process will be much more streamlined and modern, and have a lot more checks and balances, and less opportunities for data errors or other types of errors.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions?
Sure.
Go ahead.
Nan Baker, if I may ask.
Yes, please proceed.
The dates that you have in process, 11/17 to 12/15/2021. So 11/17 is coming up here pretty quickly. Are you on task to begin on that date? And if I may ask then too, we have the next technical design application, 12/8, which is also coming up. Well, the 11/17 is already passed. Will you be finished well, I'm trying to find these dates here. So not so much with Discovery and Solutions, you should already be in process on that. And you have
Right.
until February of next year. Am I understanding that right?
Correct. And so there, with this one as well, there's going to be some overlap. So when we talk about solution design, again, there's a base system that has already exists. We will have sessions with the vendor and kind of sketch out how the new functionality could potentially work. We'll be signing off on those, and then they'll take those wireframes and do the actual application development to complete that work. And again, throughout that period, we'll be seeing iterations of the product and go through various walkthroughs so that we make sure that, we're not just sitting idle in this period until October of next year. We'll be heavily involved with the vendor in developing the solution together.
So if I may, so the technical design application development, which is flowing from the Discovery solution, that's to start 12/8. I guess my question is, and you may have answered it, that will be starting on time?
Yes. So again, there's going to be some overlap.
Yeah.
So they've already done some work already, but we anticipate by next month, all the discovery has been done. They'll be able to start coding and configuring the system starting next month.
Okay. And that's a 10-month process then, from December to October?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay. So that concludes the core of the Harris presentation. Any other questions before we move on?
Okay, well, thank you very much for that presentation, and we appreciate your efforts to keep this on schedule. It's been a long process, but the last couple of reports have been more encouraging, so we hope that continues. So now, final item for this afternoon is the next update on the ERP installation, and I see that the presentation is ready to go. So, Director Ryan, please proceed.
Okay, thank you, sir. All right, so this is an update for the ERP program this afternoon, and moving right to our program status overall in the program. One of the things that there's two things that are significant that we will talk about in this presentation, at least two. First of all, we're reflecting that the payroll WFM portion of the rollout will be extended 3 months, and we'll talk about the reasons for that. The most significant piece of that from a financial point of view, and we'll show financials here in a few minutes, is that we are not, even though we're experiencing that delay of a quarter to move to the next quarter, we're not going to be experiencing an overrun on the amount of appropriated funds that we have for the program. Also significant on this slide is the fact that we have closed out the go live that started in April, and then we had some additions to that for contract management and strategic sourcing, and everything in that bundle is now 100% complete, as reflected on the slide. Lastly, we're reflecting, just to make for clarity, to be clear about where the last piece of labor budgeting that's will be implemented for OBM occurs after, can't go live until after WFM and Payroll are live, but there's some portions of that have already been started, and there's some portions that will continue to make progress. The entire piece of that doesn't have to be delayed, but the actual implementation has to be delayed until because it relies on data that comes, actual labor reporting data that comes through the WFM and payroll. So that's our current overall program status. Moving right to payroll and workforce management, there are three things that have caused us to move the project out 3 months, the final completion of that project out 3 months. One, not the least significant of that, is just the loss of key staff in a number of areas. There's been 4 key people really in the HR department that have departed the organization at this point. They had an internal ERP technical resource that also resigned and departed just this last week. There's been the fiscal support person that we have supporting other areas here for general ledger and accounts payable will be departing and retiring in January. That leaves us with a scenario where we have 4 open IT positions, something we had not anticipated. Procurement, the procurement department also has 4 open positions in it at this point in time, and there's an open position in accounts payable. So if you put that all together, just in terms of overall impact of the ERP team and the effort, there's about 14 people that are involved, that have departed, that or are departing, that we have to backfill. And we're obviously mitigating that as quickly as we can. We have positions that have been posted and anticipating some of this. Some of this couldn't be anticipated, and we've taken moves, for example, to backfill we've worked with HR to backfill, in part at least, the position of the technical person that departed HR with somebody that, while not in trained, has been engaged with the county for 14 years, so have a lot of experience that they bring into that picture that can help bridge the gap here. And procurement, I know, is in the process of interviewing. There's at least, I think it's 12 people that have applied, and they're going through qualification testing, and hopefully some good interviews will result from that. So we're dealing with staffing, but we'd be foolish to say that there was no impact from all of that staffing activity. The second item here is that we're experiencing some challenges in the aftermath of the last piece of procurement that was implemented. As I think everyone on the call knows, BuySpeed has been replaced with the new contract management strategic sourcing system. There were training for 130 people involved in buying associated with that. There was also retraining for a number of the procurement staff, changing of processes. A lot was involved in that. So the aftermath of that is that just trying to settle that down and stabilize it, is that we do have some outstanding bugs in contract management that are being addressed as we've discovered them and had them fixed. We still have a couple outstanding as of today. And a lot of that has caused the ERP staff that was working, the technical support staff that was working on payroll and workforce management. We've had to divert some of them back to fiscal, back to payroll. Back to fiscal and back to procurement to deal with that, to make sure that that's an active production system, and that has to take priority in some cases. So that's been an impact on our progress as well. Last, certainly not least here, in assessing, looking at the training that we've done for procurement and other areas, and comparing that with trying to train. We have 700 supervisors and 8,000 employees that need to be trained in the new system for time entry, for managing the payroll system, for dealing with all of the different aspects of time entry, as well as actually running the payroll. So complete retraining of staff. And We just didn't feel like we had an adequate, in-depth enough training program defined. So we've taken another look at that, and it's going to take more time to do some of that. And we've accounted for that, and that's the other reason that feeds into delay. Okay.
So Director,
Yes, sir.
it seems that this delay is different from what a lot of what we've seen in the past, in that the problems seem to be totally related to personnel and training rather than technological problems. Is that a fair assessment?
That certainly is the one of the largest impacts. If I could, the other impact, I'm just going to the next slide here for a moment, is there was a required set. There's both components to this, really. There's the personnel component, and there is a technical component here. There was a set of required updates to the solution the current solution, production solution that we have and it was a wide-ranging, large in scope, lots of changes that had to be taken. We had allotted 2.5 weeks for that process, which normally would have been adequate. We ran into some significant problems with that patch in terms of its compatibility with our current system. It required multiple iterations of retesting, and that cost us, instead of 2.5 weeks, it cost us 2.5 months. And that was not built into our schedule. So when you combine that 2.5 months with the other things that we've mentioned, all four of them together feed into the reason for our delay.
So the other aspect is that you never really recovered from the patch delay.
Well, we haven't recovered. There's no way to recover the 2.5 months of time completely from the patches. We've certainly tried in every way possible. The technical team, I can promise you, our technical team is working more than overtime at this point to try to make up any differences and to deal with issues, as well as deal with supporting the procurement rollouts. And by the way, another factor on the fiscal side is that we're approaching year end for fiscal. The great news is that all of the general ledger closings are current, and things are going pretty well in that department. The challenging news is that preparing for year end, this will be our first year end close in Infor, which is also going to consume some of our technical resource. So we're pretty overloaded in the ERP technical team at this point, in addition to, and not just the technical team, but in addition to some of the other areas.
Okay.
If I may
Ms. Baker.
ask a question, thank you. Jack, from what I recall back a few months ago, maybe even late summer, the reason why we pushed payroll into 2021 was because of these reasons, that there was just no way that we were going to be able and be prepared to have payroll launch by the end of the year, and that you needed another quarter in order to overcome what you're talking about now. Is this, piece of trying to overcome these challenges even greater than what you thought they were a few months ago when we postponed payroll?
I would have to answer that yes, and let me explain my answer. The time period that you're talking about was prior to, all of these resignations and staff changes have occurred in the last 90 days, actually a little less than that. So 14 key positions rotating in 90 days or less is a huge impact that we couldn't have anticipated, as far as I know, at that point. The other thing that's happened since that original discussion was the delay in patches. There's just no way that we could have anticipated that it was going to take 2.5 months to get those installed. So these are all more recent things, and that's the reason I'm answering your question yes.
I guess, and I understand those 2 points. The third point in training, that has not changed. The amount of people that need to be trained was always that amount. I understand the turnover, perhaps people we may have trained that we no longer have here. But as far as training, 8,000, I think was the number you had on the other screen.
Approximately.
That's not a surprise. That was
No.
always in the mix that we needed to accomplish by the first quarter of 2021, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So why are you adding that as one of the particulars that causes this further delay beyond vacancies?
I think that the short answer is I think we originally underestimated the in-depth training that was going to be required for staff. We've learned some things out of training. Well, first of all, when we originally, I don't want to go too far back in history, but when we originally estimated the time for training and the time for some of these activities, that was a lot of that was pre-COVID. We've adjusted, it is true, but we are doing everything remotely at this point, everything. And that, with that adjustment and looking at how we've done training in that environment, in the COVID environment, and looking at the depth of training that we think we'll need based on our experience with training and county employees over all of these other implementations that we've successfully completed, just looked like we didn't have enough in-depth there in a number of areas. So for those reasons, we wanted to make sure we allocated enough time. I think the system will be ready on time, but I don't think the staff, training employees and supervisors will be ready on time.
If I just may follow with the last, so how confident are you that this 3-month continued delay will put us in a place where we will continue on schedule?
I'm confident with the schedule at this point. Barring something that happens that we don't anticipate related to COVID or anything, obviously we've learned over the last few months based on the environment that we're working in that there's nothing guaranteed, but certainly we're confident that we can accomplish all the tasks.
All right. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Jack.
You bet. Yes, ma'am. Okay. So I'm moving on to just to talk a little bit about cost impacts. This would result in a June 20th cutover, to be specific about the date, with the first check I don't have the date at my fingertips here, but the first paycheck in July for that pay period. The way that we're going to keep costs under control, and we'll get to the specific forecast here in just a moment, but there's some areas that we need Info's involvement in, and some areas that we really need to own pretty much just with county staff. So we're working closely with Infor to minimize their involvement or eliminate their involvement in some cases. I don't think we ever eliminate them completely, but we certainly minimize their involvement to stay within budgets. It's important to remember their contract is deliverables based. So if we need to go do more parallel testing that doesn't necessarily involve them, for example, or do some other activities that don't necessarily involve them, then we don't have to have them involved until we need them. And then and we need them to do the rest of their deliverables, the remaining portion of their deliverables. I mean, we have at this point, for example, a pretty much fully configured payroll system with all of the changes that we'd anticipated at this point in the system. Those, and you may recall, those include all the changes related to COVID rules for hours handling as well. So that's all been completed. Now it's a matter of bringing the county's data and doing the right testing through the testing and training process. So there are opportunities to take Infor and have them less involved. This allows us some time to do that rehiring of some of those lost staff members, and it just the biggest single impact will be not Infor and the change in their contract, which is what everybody's always concerned about. Their biggest impact is really the capitalization of county staff, which doesn't have any impact on the general budget, but those hours do show up as capitalized costs within our ERP budget. So we are anticipating some additional change orders as a result of this, nothing that would exceed our appropriations. But we do know that there's a couple that we will be putting in front of Board of Control coming up here. They're not major ones, but they're obviously, everything that we do at this point is very closely scrutinized financially. Okay.
If I may ask, Chair,
Yes,
Yes.
yes, ma'am.
Please
So-
proceed.
how did, overall, we were planning on a paycheck beginning in January, and then we were beginning in April, and now we're going to have one beginning in July. How does that impact the overall program when that's pushed off like that? Is there more work that's being duplicated? I remember in conversations that the first quarter didn't seem like that was too much time to pass and we could manage it. But now we're talking 2 quarters. Is there any additional time or effort that's not part of this picture that we are doing behind the scenes in order to delay this an extra quarter?
No, that's a good question. The most ideal time to cut over payroll is at a year end.
Right.
But nobody, nor am I suggesting that we move to a year end at this point. The next best time to cut over payroll is on a quarter boundary, and which quarter boundary, whether you do that in the first quarter, second quarter, or third quarter, it's the same amount of work no matter which quarter, because you're converting whatever the quarterly balances are for some of those accumulated accounts at that time.
Right.
Okay.
So it doesn't, so I would think the first quarter would be better than the second quarter because you have twice as much, information to manage, but that's.
No, not really. From a data conversion standpoint, the data is the data, whether you're converting a few more records or transactions, you're really talking, minutes or seconds difference, and file loads, not a major change in the time that it takes to do that.
Good. Thank you. It's good to know.
Sure.
So Director,
Sure.
you said that the delay would not require an additional appropriation, but we know that the projected total spend was less than the total amount appropriated by a meaningful amount. And my question is whether the total spend is going to increase, and if so, by how much? And
I'm sorry.
And for this question, I'm not talking about anything where staff time, county staff time that would be spent anyway, is moved from operating to capital. I'm talking about things like additional contracts and change orders that actually increase the county's bottom line. Can you give us a number on that?
I don't have the specific number of non-ERP items, so I think what you're referring to is some of the costs that would be incurred in continuing to operate the mainframe system, for example, longer than we'd anticipated. So we had budgeted from an operational budgeting standpoint. We went ahead and budgeted through the end of 2021 for the mainframe. So we wouldn't see any. I believe I can make this statement. I will double check this to make sure and provide the specific answer, but I don't think you're going to see any major operational increases due to that at this point. So we've I think tried to anticipate the extension of those contracts, although I will come up with a specific number and provide you a specific list feedback.
And will there be additional costs for change orders?
There will be some additional change orders. The change orders that we're looking at, well, if I could defer that for just a minute, and I've got a list up along with the financial position, and I could go through those.
That'd be fine.
Okay. All right.
Any other questions, my colleagues, before we proceed? Okay, please proceed.
Okay. Yes, sir. Just in terms of what's actually happening now, I put this slide up before, but a lot of the things have been completed here. What is continuing is additional training for the non-executive agencies that are going to be entering time directly into the payroll system that will not be using WFM. We're working with them, and I think we know that there's additional training that's required in that area. The other thing is that we're continuing to work with garnishments. That's a sensitive legal area and requires our attention, so it stays on our radar screen. We have a whole process in place and a procedure defined for how garnishments will be managed, but we're continuing to work through that. And we're continuing to test WFM as we go through this time period. So those things are on target. Payroll reports is here. Just we're close to having all of those defined. There were some specific things that specific requirements for reporting that we identified as we went through the final configuration of the payroll system. And so those reports, we're really waiting. We've identified them. We're just working with the business units to get them approved so that we can get them completed. So that's sort of current activities going on. Just a note here, because it is related, because it was related to all of those patches that we had to install for GHR. The open enrollment process did complete successfully, and kudos to the HR department for having worked through this right down to the wire. But we made the schedule, and the benefits plan cut over, along with the files, the benefits enrollment files that have to go over to vendors, is expected to be on time from HR, from GHR. So that will close out open enrollment on schedule. No problems anticipated there. Okay. So moving on to program finances, I've really consolidated. Oh, I'm sorry.
Before
Yes,
you
sir.
move on to finances, just a comment
Yes, sir.
on what we've heard about the delay in schedule. My desire is that going forward that we achieve more stability so that plans are developed and effectively implemented. And my suggestion is that we focus on 3 primary goals for the coming year. And the first is to execute the 2021 ERP plans on time and on budget. And the second one is that we fill the ERP-related vacant positions in IT and other departments. And the third is that we do more detailed planning for 2022 and 2023 so that we develop plans that we know that we can execute. And my question is whether you would see these as reasonable primary goals to focus on.
I certainly agree with all 3 of those. And I know we're toward the end of this slide deck. We have a short discussion on future planning, but I think that planning, we have an opportunity in those future years to, and I'll talk about that in a minute, to really do this a little bit more efficiently going forward. So looking forward to that, and obviously trying to keep our project on schedule to wrap up what we're calling phase 1 of ERP at this point.
Okay, please proceed.
Yes, sir. So I have the October 30th budget for ERP is included in backup. I didn't include it in the primary slide deck here, but just summarized where we have been for the last 3 months, so you can see the progression of the budget. As I mentioned a minute ago, the list of change orders in the lower left-hand side here, the new ones that the 2 the 2 new change orders that we are looking at with ERP with Infor is some technical assistance for procurement and just to help us make some changes in the procurement process that'll make that a little more efficient. And we'll talk about, I have an operational section where we can talk about procurement improvement here in just a minute. The other one is additional training assistance. We mentioned more in-depth training a minute ago. I'd like to engage Infor to do some of that training, especially for supervisors. We have, again, 700 or so supervisors to train. That's a lot. And while we may be able to have employees for their time entry go through a video and look online for a course and walk through that, and we can register that and make that mandatory, for example, as part of our learning management system, just like we have for ethics training and other things. For supervisors, supervisors will be the first line of defense for questions from their employees on how to do things. They will be doing approvals that in some cases they haven't been doing approvals for time clocks because there wasn't a facility to do that in our old legacy system. So they're going to be doing some new things as well. So all of that said, that requires in-person, well, I say in-person training. It's remote, but at least remote classroom style training where we have a live system and a Q&A session with supervisors to give them a more in-depth training. And that training, just because of its nature, the remote nature of what we're doing and everything, it's just going to take some time. So, and some resources. So that's the training assistance that we're talking about, is that change order that you see for 100, estimated right now at 144,000. So that, those are the two change orders that I was speaking about earlier. The staff, the cost of extending staff through that additional time period over and above what we had previously forecasted for county staff working on ERP is the $229,680 number that you see there. So the net effect of that is it consumes some of our appropriations, but does not exceed our appropriated budget. We still have a remaining appropriation of $453,638 after those forecasted expenses. So the net effect, I guess the other thing is the net effect of all of these changes on the general budget, not just the ERP capitalization, but the general budget is $89,000. So we've done that. Again, I know I previously briefed this to some individual council members, but we've done that we've terminated some contracts, gaining some funds back, and then repurposed them for some of these other things that we felt it was a more efficient way to approach getting done what we needed to. So in that sense, we're doing everything possible that we can to try to exercise proper budgetary control for the program. Any questions on finances at this point? Okay. Just an update on operations. Very quickly here, this slide is now, I'm happy to report, this was captured as of last week. This slide is now inaccurate. We've moved from a high of 75 open issues, a lot of those related to those procurement challenges that I discussed earlier. We're now down to 55 as of this morning. I didn't remake the slide, but I'm happy to point out that at least I think we're moving in the right direction on these issues at this point. So, this is always an indication of how things are going. So we watch these very closely. Just in terms of updates on fiscal modules, I've already talked about the things that have been completed. The things that are significant here are based on staff contention and just not wanting to take on more than we can support. We placed on hold grants management and accounts receivable billing. Remember, we've completed all the major rollouts. The core stuff is all rolled out. These are rollouts to additional departments and for additional functionality. And we're just going to have to defer that into 2021 at this point, so we can keep the team focused on current operations and current implementation work. The things that are continuing in those additional functionality rollouts are asset management, continued with some additional training for folks in that area. And we still are, although it's moving at a slower pace just because of the support required and honestly just because of some of the things that we're experiencing with trying to get things done in a COVID environment, we are continuing to move forward. Fiscal is continuing to move forward to roll this out, to roll out accounts payable to other groups. Veteran Services, Adams Board, and BODD are still the next targeted groups to take on doing their own accounts payable. And again, emphasizing the reason that that's so important is because right now, for accounts payable, all of these outlying departments outside of this building feed paper to the fiscal department. And so to the degree that we can get everybody to do their own work from their own location, it not only shortens the process dramatically, but eliminates paper coming into the building that's unnecessary because it makes it all electronic. So that's the significance of the accounts payable. We have sort of formally put in place here a procurement improvement plan here to try to address some of the issues that we've been experiencing with the new procurement. I think the good news is that we have all of the procurement structure in place. The challenging news is that we fully implemented all of the controls to the extent that we've tightened down the procurement process to the point where in some cases we've made it just difficult for people to move things through the process. And so there's some things that we believe we can do to now that we've watched this work for a couple of months here with contract management, especially being introduced as the new module. There's the things that we can do to streamline the process, and so that's what we are looking at doing with this procurement improvement process. So we're looking at all aspects of this, everything from staff, what the staff's doing to what are we doing with the system, what ERP resources we need. And that's the reason we decided we needed a change order with Infor to come in and help us make some technical changes to the process to make it more efficient. So that's something we're going to be working through. We are working through, not going to be. We are working through, and some of those changes have already been made.
So, Director,
yes, sir.
Is there one person who is in charge of directing the procurement improvement planning process, and if so, who would that be?
Well, it's certainly I'm taking ownership of getting the process in place, so ultimately, since it's an ERP system, I have responsibility for that. I will be. We've got people dedicated. We have ERP support staff dedicated to the procurement area, and so they will play a key role in driving some of these points home. So. But I'll maintain responsibility for this until we reach a point where I feel we can turn it over to somebody, because this is really key that we get this moving.
So, Director, you've got a lot on your plate, and
yes, sir.
And the procurement improvement planning, it's an issue we struggled with for years, almost since the start of the new government, and I think. Right. I think it is truly worthy of finding one person who's capable and able to take this on as their responsibility to lead it. So I would just ask you to think about that.
Yes, sir. Believe me, it's not something I do plan to pick somebody to make sure that they're heading this, but I want to make sure I'm not doing it at the expense of, for example, payroll or some other especially other activities in the support arena. So we're walking fairly fine balance here in terms of doing this, but I recognize the need to get others involved for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir. So in anticipation of next year's operations, to sort of close out the financial piece of this, we did make a budget request placeholder for a budget request of $450,000 for next year, and that was excuse me, that was primarily to cover two things, two types of training, staff training for the ERP staff. We've been running, honestly, at such a fast pace. I mean, if you look at the number of modules that have been implemented, you know, we're 20 out of 23 implemented here at this point, which is, considering the environment, considering everything that's happened over the last year or year and a half or so, phenomenal. And my kudos again to both the business staff that have been so many people involved, as well as the ERP support staff. They've done a phenomenal job. But what we haven't stopped to do is to get them additional advanced training, which is also key to making sure that we cut our consulting budgets and take on more and more responsibility ourselves so that we can do most of this work ourselves. So that's the reason there's two types of training. There's just formal training that we can take people through. Some of that's online. Some of that may be classroom. Most of it's online courses that we can have people take and get engaged with. The other is what I would call knowledge transfer, where we have somebody actually come in that's an expert in an area and spend time one-on-one or one-on-two or three with our staff to make sure that they're fully up to speed on a lot of the technical details of how the product works. Notwithstanding those things, we don't know what we don't know. We don't know what problems we're going to run into that may require some additional support beyond our technical capabilities. So I've allotted a certain amount of money for just those kinds of unknown problems that will occur. You just don't know what they are. Something will happen. So I took that and looked at that and said that's probably about $372,000, and honestly, just rounded it up to $450,000 as a placeholder, so that we could do these things next year. Any questions on that?
Jack Nan Baker.
Ms. Baker?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you anticipate that these operational costs will only be for 2021? And that as we move into 2021 and into 2022, that we become more efficient and perhaps either cross-train within our own ability, or even not need perhaps all that we're training for? I mean, is this a one-time operational cost that we're only having to pay for because we're still launching the ERP?
Well, the training classes, there's probably two parts to your question. I wouldn't anticipate necessarily training costs to be at this level going into 2022. But some of that depends on the decisions that we make in about 2022. We got the need to continuously train people, I think, will always be there. And whether that's, $10K a year per person,
Right.
I'm not sure if I could answer that question right now as to whether that's going to be required in 2022 or not. My sense would be certainly a significant amount of money ought to be invested in training, because everything that we invest in training is something we don't have to invest in consulting, which will cost us 3 times as much as a typical employee salary, as we've proven. So what I would expect to decrease is the knowledge transfer time going into 2022. But we'll look at the modules for those years in just a moment. You'll see what I'm talking about.
Okay. I guess the reason why we even went and wanted an ERP system is because we wanted to be more efficient.
Yes, ma'am.
Wanted to have better numbers, be updated as to how we do things and how we can save money and how we can improve upon what we're doing. So do you see that still happening, or are there just going to be additional costs that will always haunt us because it is a system that continually needs to be ongoing training? I mean, where do you see the cost savings? And the
Well, I think any system would require ongoing training, but I didn't address your benefits question. I don't think.
Okay.
Yes, I think we have an opportunity to get more efficient. We have laid the foundation for that. As the example in procurement, as I discussed with Ann a minute ago, we have fully implemented procurement. You know, are there things that we could change to become a lot more efficient? I think the answer to that is absolutely. So we can streamline the process, and as we do that, we can experience some savings. Accounts payable was another perfect example. If we roll out accounts payable to every department, board, and agency, and they're doing their own accounts payable entry, we will not be handling a ton of paper that comes into the fiscal department on the third floor. If you walk down there, you'll know what I'm talking about. There are just a lot of things that come into that department. So there's certainly opportunities to get more efficient. We've got to get stable first, and then we can pick up that efficiency. And it just takes some time to get stable after turning off a 25 to 30-year-old system or systems.
Right.
Hey, Jack, Mike Chambers.
Yes, sir.
I just to Councilwoman Baker's question. I also have transferred 4 people from my area. So I took 2 individuals, I moved them up to the county recorder. I took 1 down to the treasurer, and I moved another person over to an administrative spot. And this goes back to that accounts payable section where the work's just not there anymore. So as we continue to roll those out to those other agencies, more and more people will be repurposed. Now, all those positions I put them in were people that retired. So we did not hire back, just so you know.
Yeah, great example of exactly the kind of thing we're talking about. We anticipate more of that as we, as we stabilize. And accounts payable is one of those areas that's more stable than procurement right now, just because we just finished rolling out, the latest of the procurement modules to replace BuySpeed.
That's all in the past month. So
Good.
Perfect. Okay. All right.
Please continue.
Yes, sir. So just in terms of future strategy, I think this slide really embodies what we're talking about here. In 2020 and 2021, I think obviously completing payroll, if we talked about, complete the OVM pieces. And as we take the remainder of 2021 and stabilize and train, and slow the pace for some of our ERP staff. We have pushed them literally, and a number of the business staff as well, that have been heavily involved in implementations. We have pushed them extremely hard, and we know that we've got to push extremely hard here for the next 6 months or so as we get through the rest of payroll for a number of folks. But we need to get back to a more reasonable pace where we haven't got everybody working 50 hours or 60 hours a week, which is what's going on right now with many of the staff. So please be patient with them and us as we work through stabilization on some of this stuff. Moving into 2022, we need to review our need to upgrade ERP to the latest version. There's more flexibility and screens can be tailored a little more easily. There's some real benefits to that next version, but there's also a cost. It's only financials that would need to go to the latest version. We're on the latest version for treasury management and for GHR, human resources. And then we also, in 2022, we need to look at implementing the functionality that we deferred for non-core modules for HR. It's talent management, total rewards, expense management. So those are the things that would be anticipated in that sequence in terms of our overall strategy. Just, what's that phase 2 look like? I'm not going to walk through every module here, but you can kind of see. So obviously these things that have a little bit of green on them are things that we have, we're already working through this. We're just working through, as the note says here, at a slower pace as staff, as our existing staff time permits. We've got some other things toward the end of 2021 that we need to look at here. I know that EM team is looking at inventory, and we're also looking at tighter. There's some integration with the AM that our staff can do that needs to be done here. So that's and then archiving everything that's on the mainframe so that we complete the shutdown process for the mainframe. So once we cut over the systems off the mainframe, we still have to go through the process of taking all that data from the mainframe, putting it into a system where it's accessible so we can look back at years of history without losing it before we shut the mainframe down. So that's sort of the plan for 2021 primarily. As what I'm calling phase 3 here, as you move into 2022, then these are these modules that were deferred, that we need to take a close look at how we implement those in 2022. And then we need to take a look at how we're managing our data overall. We have an opportunity to make data really work for us and make it more easily accessible. And there's some tools out there that we can use to do that. So during 2022, we would look at those things. We would look at implementing deferred functionality, look at implementing these tools here for better, more user-oriented reporting so that users can do more on their own and take less IT support to get things done, honestly, in a lot of areas. And then as you move into 2023, depending on exactly how we make a decision on what we want to do with an upgrade as a county, we need to look really hard at currently the next version is version 11. By the time you get to 2023, that may be version 12, for all I know. But what we need to do is look at this from an ROI perspective this time and say, before we make a decision to upgrade to the next version, we may want to hold on our current version and make sure we get leverage everything possible before we spend more money on a major ERP upgrade. So I think it's the ROI that should drive that decision with all of the right stakeholders involved from everywhere. So that's basically an outline of the strategy, at least over the next 3 years or so. Any questions? Okay. Well, that concludes what I have for the ERP update. If there's any questions from the staff. There were advanced questions submitted about 2 weeks ago, and there's answers to all of those in all of the backup slides as well. I should point that out.
So I would just ask my colleagues if there are any further questions before we close the ERP update. Okay, hearing none, I would just mention that our usual program with Zig Berzins on the following Thursday, this coming Thursday, has been canceled because of the press of other business that we have to attend to. Zig has monitored today's program, and he's going to send us a report which we can review and then see if we have any follow-up questions either to him or to the department, so we can proceed in that way. I'm happy to see that we've made progress, but obviously we're going to have to continue this oversight process closely throughout 2021 and beyond. So we will continue to work to see this program and the Harris project to their completions. So I would just go to the next item on the agenda. Is there any miscellaneous business? Hearing none, and there being no further business before this committee, we stand adjourned. Thanks, everybody, for their time and attention.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you.